know what worries me is I've been feeling the inklings online of people saying that free speech is becoming a problem and that we need to start censoring speech. And that worries me because I
Mm-hmm.
recognize where that's going to go.
Right.
And it's not going to be a pretty place.
No. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, there are times when I hear people popping off about crazy shit that I'm like, I wish they could not talk.
Mhm.
They shouldn't have a platform. It's terrible. But if you start restricting one person's speech, that is a very slippery slope. And as much as I might not want to hear what this person has to say, and I might be horrified at the way they're influencing people, you can take, for example, our last president. Um, you know, free speech is huge and I honor it. And I think it is one of the most important things in our society because, without it, I don't know, what are we, because it's such a slippery slope. So it's like we censor Donald Trump. Then who else do we censor? Do we censor all the other loud people that we don't like? Who's censoring them? Is it the
That's the
left?
thing. Who
So are
gets
we
to
just going to
pick?
censor all of the right? Well,
Yeah.
that's not right. I don't agree with what a lot of those folks have to say about politics, but I certainly agree with some of them on some things, and certainly they should not have that taken away from them, And I mean, that's really scary, and I wish people need to think about the bigger picture and yeah, I don't even know. I mean, of course, it's just so dependent on the individual situation as to, well, here would be a better way to deal with this or something. But yeah, that is terrifying. It's almost as slippery of a slope as robots and things, which I get really weirded out about technology. I'm like,
Oh,
nope, it's
really?
slippery slope. That's eugenics. I don't know.
Eugenics. That's definitely a crazy thing. Well, it's the problem with the problem with censoring speech is, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Is first off, who gets to decide?
Hmm.
Because if it's one side, that's going to be bad. If you
Hmm.
give the power to the government, we know that's not going to
Yeah,
end well.
that's bad.
What, we just let the left censor? I mean, are we just going to censor based on feelings? Oh, this person said
Yeah,
something
and
I
whose
disagree with.
feelings?
What offends you might not
Yeah,
offend me, or
right,
vice versa, or it might
right,
not offend all these people. If it offends one person, is that
right,
enough to censor it?
right,
What if it's got some validity to it and it
right,
strikes some argument that maybe we need to look at?
right,
Do we censor that too? Like, where do we draw the line? I mean, it's
right,
crazy that people died for this, right? And now we're just gonna ship it away because, yeah, it doesn't make me feel good.
right.
Like, I
Yeah,
don't
which
want it.
that is, I mean, that is, I hate that, like, I don't want to hear it. I mean, we all have to hear things that we don't necessarily want to hear
Welcome
or
to
are
life.
difficult to hear.
Yeah.
This is life. Thankfully, we are afforded those rights, to be able to say what we want. And surely there are some people, that have a harder time having the freedom to say those things. That is a problem. That is something that definitely exists. But we have to be careful about that. And I mean, I don't know the history. I mean, now I'm thinking about it. I would like to know more about this, but I'm curious as to when the term hate speech was designated or founded. So,
That's
because
interesting.
obviously that would have been, I would imagine, people saying things that are to harm a group of people. That is, I don't know if that is the definition of hate speech, but that is kind of how I would just, say it off the dome. But I mean, there must have been obviously there was legislation or something, a Supreme Court decision that, deemed this is what hate speech is. So that is important. And so I guess those are avenues to sort of deal with those things that we don't like. Although some, could also argue that that is a form of censorship,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's a very different thing when you're in effect threatening someone's life.
Yeah.
That's different. But
But
yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
that's a,
it's crazy. Even with
yeah,
hate speech, part of me is like, yeah, but where do we draw the line with that? I
sure.
mean, yeah, there are some things we all recognize shouldn't be said, but I've talked to people who that list is way longer than where I
Yeah,
would draw it.
sure.
And it's like, okay, well, if they were censoring things, it might get a little ugly. I
Right.
mean, words words have power, and that's one of the beautiful things behind them
Mm.
is that they allow us to express ideas in really different ways and get points across that we wouldn't be able to otherwise. And when you start pulling words out of your vocabulary for whatever reason,
Mhm.
if it's hate speech or if it just doesn't make you feel good or you don't like how it sounds, whatever, you're limiting your ability to express your thoughts and your emotions.
Mhm.
And it might seem like a good idea in the moment, but there's no set line. And even
Right.
if we set a line, somebody's going to come along and want to move it.
Right.
And I just don't think people realize that. Like they hear, "Oh, hate speech," and they're like, "Yeah, that's bad. Like
Mhm.
that's good that we shouldn't promote that. We should get rid of that." But it's like, "Okay, well what is hate speech?
Right.
Just words that make you feel bad?" Because there's a
Right.
lot of words that could be said that would make somebody feel bad.
Mhm.
I don't think I'd classify them all in that category, you know? I just it worries me because I don't think, and it seems like it's a lot of the younger generation, even people my age that are kind of going against free speech.
Mhm.
And I try to tap the brakes. I'm like, guys, you don't know where that leads. I mean,
Right.
look at China.
No.
Do we want to be in that position? I've talked to friends actually who say we should model ourselves more after China because
Oh my
they've really got it
gosh.
down over there. And I'm like, do you know anything about what's going on in China? Because they
Right.
definitely do not. They have it locked down, yeah, but not in any good way.
Right. Yeah, all the videos and things that all the websites you go to on your
Tiananmen
phone,
Square, you're
you
never going to see
can't.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you cannot access that. And I mean, we don't even know the level of censorship that does happen in the United States because it does. Gosh, what was I listening to? It was they mentioned a CD. I can't remember who it was. It was like a Tool CD or something. Oh my gosh, it wasn't like System of a Down that's like super political, but it was more it was a lot more mild than that. But it was, gosh, he was on this podcast I keep referring to, but
Pretty good podcast.
oh my gosh, no, I'm like so addicted to both of them that I mentioned. They have one of this dude Michael Hobbs is on both of them, and
Mm-hmm.
he's amazing. He's a writer for the HuffPost,
Okay.
and
I'll have to check it out.
he's a delight. I mean, he's people who are all about critical thinking and looking critically at information is just I love those people. But he had said that he was in Australia when whatever the CD came out. So he has the Australian copy and it has the song on it that wasn't allowed on the US version of it because the US government deemed it inappropriate or whatever. So that happens here. It totally does. But I mean, certainly not to take away from your fear of,
No,
what could
yeah.
happen because I mean, so there is a really wonderful resource that you should look at, that everyone should look at, and it's called the World Press Freedom Index. And it is a map that's put together by Reporters Without Borders every year. And it just ranks every country in the world based on their press freedom. And you look at that map, and it tells you an awful lot about the general freedoms of those citizens. So of course, one of the worst is always like North Korea, China, like Saudi Arabia, the countries that you would probably assume that there's, war torn, that they're dictators, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
Russia. Those countries are not doing good. And, the United States usually ranks around, so one being the best. United States, if I remember correctly, usually ranks around like the 40 to 50 mark.
Wow. I would
Yeah.
have guessed top 10.
No,
Wow.
no, not at all. So who is in the top 10 is, and of course, population has to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Conflict within the country has a piece to do with it. So, like, Iceland is number one occasionally. Probably not a whole lot of conflict in Iceland,
Yeah, they're not
So,
worried about nuking anybody over in
right.
Iceland.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's worth mentioning with it. But and then, each country you can click and it kind of gives you a little synopsis as to why this country is rated this way. And maybe it's like this for 2020, I would guess that there would be the US has probably dropped because of, protesting, how cops crack down on it, all the crazy shit that was going on in Portland with,
The
unmarked
chop or whatever.
vehicles.
Yeah.
Yeah, unmarked vehicles just scooping up protesters. That's crazy. I mean, So I would be curious as to where the US lands now, but I mean, what a wonderful resource because I mean, getting back to the journalist element of this conversation, I mean, a society is only as free as its press is, truly. And yeah, look at that map and think about where we stand there. I mean, we're certainly way better than a lot of other countries in a much better position, rather. But, also being ranked, 47,
It's not good.
it's not good. And why? Why are we there? Critically look at that and think about that. And, where do we learn from that? And it's fascinating because you can, of course, look at I don't know how long they've been putting this map together, but different years. And of course, every year it's like, oh, that happened, or they were in power, or whatever. I mean, it's so telling of what's going on in society.
That is so crazy.
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna have to comb through that now.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have bet money on top 10 at least, top 15,
Yeah.
maybe worst.